There's a bit of a trend found in a lot of indie titles, specifically the one of a small child in a big scary world, with the loss of innocence and other things that would follow, like Child of Light for example. One of the games which did this first, and more specifically the best, is Limbo. Limbo might have been one of the games which spiked the huge popularity of indie titles in recent years. In the game, everything is presented in shadows and silhouettes, which consist of black and tiny bits of white. This may seem like a gimmicky way to seem more authentic or artistic, but there's a lot more to Limbo's presentation than it seems, which I will go into later.
Limbo starts off simply as you as a small child waking up in a dark forest. No explanation, no context. It's simply for you to start walking through the dark world that surrounds you. You encounter creatures and even other people trying to survive the elements like yourself. However, they're not very friendly towards you, much like almost everything in this game that you traverse. This creates the atmosphere to be both lonely and fearful, which is emphasized even more by you being a small child. The world you are traversing appears to be old and abandoned, or at least in post-crisis situation, such as the people fending for their lives, and the remnants of old buildings. Though even with these situations that you come across, Limbo isn't that story-driven. In fact, traditional storytelling aspects found in other games are pretty minimal. You keep moving because you don't want to be killed by the hostile things you come across. It's up to you, and only you, to continue moving to survive in this harsh world that you seem to be stuck in. Keep moving, to survive. Simple. As you continue, you must solve puzzles and overcome situations in order to progress. And being a puzzle platformer, this is where one of Limbo's biggest strengths lie.
Limbo is primarily a puzzle game, with lots of platforming elements throughout. I played it through on the PC as Special Edition, in which you move around and jump with the arrow keys and interact with the control key.
Both the puzzles and platforming start out very simple, but they give you a taste of what kind of thinking and logic you'll need to continue. And some of the later puzzles, be it a little repetitive, really push you to think what makes what work, and how the hell you're going to figure this out. I got more satisfaction from some of the puzzles in this game than I did from many in The Legend of Zelda. They are really good, and many of them are really unique and different. Many of the puzzles are physics-based, which work excellently, and always find new ways to test your mind. Though about 2/3 through the game, you kinda know what to expect, and some of them lose a bit of their charm. Aside from the usual lever pulling, box pushing, and switch stepping, Limbo makes you try all the possible ways to figure out the puzzle. You'll often know what you're trying to accomplish, just figuring out how things work, or even what things to use will play a large part. Things that you overlook completely might be the key to the way forward. Though it is fair, they'll be in plain sight and it'll be up to you to pick up on what to do, which can be the hard part. And the ways many of the puzzles work too are superb. Many things that you wouldn't even think to try in other puzzle platformers are essential in Limbo, but in a good way. Anything you might try on a whim might give you an idea on what to do.
Limbo also makes use of some questionable and even at times really sadistic ways of getting things to work, which is probably one of its biggest strengths. For example, you may need to use a dead body to float across a lake, or manipulate something into triggering the way forward. You'll even need to do things that you'll feel terrible about doing.
In the first 5 minutes, you'll find even small elements that are unlike almost anything found in a puzzle platformer before. It's really unique, and reminds you that just because you're a child doesn't mean the world will be nice to you. Speaking of the game's world, it's pretty unforgiving, and you'll have to find your own way to survive, sometimes at the sacrifice of others. The game doesn't particularly hold your hand, but it gives you enough time to get the grasp of what you're doing. If you do make a mistake, or screw up, for example push the wrong thing into the wrong place under a time limit, you'll know, sometimes even before the game lets you know, if your death isn't in a bear trap. Deaths in this game are pretty graphic, well at least for a game which only uses silhouettes that is, and you will die. A lot. Though again, it is fair. There are somewhat occasional trial and error sections in this game, but not the cheap hidden deaths found in lots of platformers, for the sake of artificial difficulty, but a choice you make, which you soon realize wasn't the right one, and your fate has already been sealed. Not once did I think the game had cheated me into my death, or unfairly put me in a situation where I wasn't cautious enough or couldn't react properly. It also paces the player. You don't rush from one puzzle or place to another. Things have just the right build-up, to keep tension but not to bore the player by being too slow.
Presentation-wise, the game looks beautiful. Using just silhouettes, Playdead managed to create a variety of unique environments, which are for the most part very atmospheric. I got chills walking through some of these areas. Everything blends together just right.
The silhouettes in the background environments align extremely well with the levels, and are far more than just a simple backdrop. You can definitely forget this is just a puzzle platformer. This is particularly effective when you blend in and out of the backdrop itself, which actually crafts a much deeper experience as you're more walking through the environment opposed to just along from left to right. Even with everything in the same silhouetted art style, things don't really get bland in terms of visual variety. Each area has different interactive elements and detail which reflect the environment. Industrial areas will have lots of moving mechanical gears and pipelines. Forests contain dangerous creatures, downed trees, boulders and caves. Even with just shades of black and white, it brings more visual variety than many games I've seen. Within Limbo, there's a constant overhanging loneliness and sorrow as you play. It's not a particularly happy game. Things like dead bodies hang from place to place, and it can make you feel quite uneasy sometimes. Even the state things are in as you traverse can be quite unsettling. Not hugely, but just enough to make you feel uneasy as you continue. A tiny bit of anxiety from the overhanging sadness. It actually mixes in pretty well. There's little music in the game, most of the background noise is from the environments, and to be honest, it doesn't really need much music. The situations are made more tense and unsettling by just how quiet everything is. However, what it does have is subtly excellent, and the tracks blend right into the different areas. With all of these aspects together, you can forget it's just a puzzle platformer. It's more like an experience than anything else.
I cannot think of one thing Limbo doesn't do well. It doesn't have much of a soundtrack, but it doesn't really need one. And what it has just adds icing to the top of the cake. The gameplay is brilliant, the presentation is superb, and the atmosphere is unsettlingly excellent. Limbo earns a 10 out of 10. It has just the right balance of atmosphere and gripping gameplay. It also has decent length for an indie title. I got at least 4 hours out of my first playthrough, and for the price, it's worth every single cent. I highly recommend this game. Just make sure you're ready for it.